Hi everyone, my name is Patrick Akil, and for today's episode, we cover collaborative modeling. We go over why we model in the first place, what problems it solves, and how you can even apply it yourself. For today's guest, I had Marco Heimeshoff on, who's a trainer, speaker, and he even organizes the Kandinsky conference about TDD. I'll put the links to his socials as well as the conference in the description below. And with that being said, enjoy the episode.
Beyond coding.
So I know you through Kenny, and Kenny does kind of the same thing. It's getting so much more popular, right? Domain-driven design as well as event storming. But a lot of organizations just need help with it because they've probably read somewhere, somehow about it, think it's a good idea for reasons, but have no clue where to start. So when exactly do you come in? Is it when they've read something or when you've published something?
Well, that varies a lot from customer to customer
Yeah.
or from company to company. So my journey started, it's very different over the years. It started somewhere around 2010.
Yeah.
And back in the day, I was learning about it from Eric Evans and Greg Young and some other people in London on a conference about DDD. And in the very first, let's say 2 or 3 years, I've been applying it basically to my own company where I was a team lead.
Yeah.
So we were building a healthcare system and putting domain-driven design into practice. And I realized that it's really hard to learn everything through experimentation and on your own.
Yeah.
So going to a lot of conferences, sharing with the community, starting the DDD community in Germany to get other people interested in this topic, which I find highly, not only interesting, but highly productive.
Yeah.
It was like the solution of the problem that Agile couldn't solve and that test-driven couldn't solve and that all the architecture patterns couldn't solve. Because what was missing was modeling.
Yeah.
Having a conversation between domain experts and stakeholders and programmers and get all the right people into the room to finally have the conversation, not only once, but continuously, and applying this as a culture. So in the beginning, the first few years of my activity, it was like a slow gradual push towards like, hey, let's build a community of practitioners. Let's get people interested in these things and let's get them experimenting and then exchanging ideas. And then more and more companies said, "Hey, I've heard you talk. I've seen this article. I've been in one of your workshops. Can you do this in our company, please? Can you help us with the problem?" And it's mostly when people feel they have a need. There's a gap, right? They feel, oh, we didn't really model properly, and now we want to.
Yeah.
I would say between 2014 and 2018 or so. That's like roughly until 1 or 2 years before the pandemic. That was the main drive for people to approach. They saw a talk, there was kind of like an impulse, and they realized, oh, that's missing here.
Yeah.
We really need to collaborate better and more. And we're not lacking the will to do it, but we're lacking the methods of how do you approach that, right?
Yeah.
How do you get the right people in the room, especially because in many cases, culture is I wouldn't say broken, but it got to a certain way where it's really hard to build the trust between programmers and non-programmers.
Yeah.
Or the technical folks and the non-technical ones. So getting people to communicate again, to trust again. So the developers to actually be interested in the domain because they know their impact and their ideas matter. And the domain experts and stakeholders to really trust the developers to have their interests at heart and not just wanting to build a cool new framework or something. To rebuild that trust takes effort.
Yeah.
And one of those methods that we're using, the event storming, which is one of my favorite collaborative modeling methods. It has it basically built in. It's a trust building mechanism, if you like, because it's so simple to learn. You don't have any power when you know the method, but the other person doesn't, right? Or don't. So you bring the right people together, and the conversation usually starts with a bit of guidance into a very natural flow over a very short period of time. And that became more and more and more a thing that was really successful. And then, well, I started consulting full time at some point. And then the pandemic hit, and now everything really changed because now people realized we don't need to have a consultant here in the building, right? We don't need to get them in.
Yeah.
So when you can do that remote, there is a lot of drawbacks to remote collaborative modeling, and we can talk about that at length.
Yeah.
We've been experimenting like hell in the last 2 years with that.
I can imagine.
But there's trade-offs. There's strong trade-offs there. But some things actually even work better in remote. But it became even in a world where the pandemic goes down, people can meet again, right? It becomes a trade-off now to make a decision like, shall we meet in person
Yeah.
or shall we do a remote workshop? And neither format is best in every situation. They both have pros and cons. But one of the major pros of a remote workshop is you can remote workshop from anywhere.
Yeah.
You can get a consultant or a trainer or a facilitator from all around the world, so you can really pick those that fit your culture the best, that really understand your kind of problem or that have experience with your kind of needs, and you can do it for short amounts of time. So that's something we've been doing a lot in the last year or so, not having these 3 or 5 day modeling sessions because you need all the experts to come into a building
Yeah.
and then really lock their time, right? But you can do it in a relaxed format, say half a day and then a day or two of rework and then another half day. So we can really adjust to the needs of the customers.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's what I've been doing the last 2 years.
Yeah. Makes
And
sense.
it's a continuum of change. So there is never a stable like this is how my work goes. It depends on what customers need.
Yeah.
So sorry for babbling on, right? But feel free to stop me at any time.
Yeah, don't worry about it. I like that it's giving you kind of this flexibility now, as well as with the remote working. No day is probably ever the same. But I can imagine what I've heard, and also while talking to Kenny and Evelyn van Kelle as well, is that you need the same people in the same room, right? But if you're doing this remote, it's going to be a virtual room, and people are going to get distracted. It's not the same sitting physically and looking each other in the eye and even modeling. Because you can't really, I mean, you have virtual rooms, probably something like Miro or whatever that you can use to just draw out a mind map or whatever. But it's different, isn't it? I think it's getting harder and harder to get those people enthusiastic and to get them to collaborate in that way as well.
Absolutely, I'm totally with you there. So there's those are the strongest drawbacks, I figure. The one is getting people really excited about a workshop, because if it's just the next meeting, right? You click Teams or Zoom, you close it,
Yeah.
you open up the next meeting. It's like, okay, let's get a coffee, and what are we doing
Very
now?
mundane. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not, if you get people into a collaborative modeling session in person, it's usually they fly over or they take a train ride, or what, at least it's movement, right? You go there and this is locked time and it feels like a different thing.
Yeah.
Changing scenery, seeing all the people, especially having humans in your vicinity, a group of those gives you a certain feeling of the audience. And
Yeah.
in Zoom or Meet, it's just like you have a bunch of faces, half of them have their cameras turned off, and it's really hard to get a company culture where people feel excited about sitting in front of a camera. So yeah, that's a thing that's really dragging, which is why we need a lot of exercises for that. And there was something by Terry Frith, a workshop by Terry Frith that I took a while ago, called "Training from the Back of the Room," and that totally blew my mind in that regard. It's about brain-friendly learning, like the most information about how humans actually learn, how the brain really learns,
Yeah.
came from studies from the last 10, 12 years or so. So humanity has made a lot of progress in understanding how learning works. And to really effectively learn something, you need short bursts of connecting with the topic, right? Connecting the audience to the topic, and then getting a short, like 5, 10, maybe 15 minutes introduction to an idea.
Yeah.
And then you need to practice phase. And then after that, a reflection where you teach back, or where you somehow transfer the knowledge and the practiced ideas into some other format by writing it down or whatever. Like that's the rough gist of it. But that meant, from the before times when we had like half day or full day sessions of a single activity with 30 people in a room, we now try to boil it down to shorter bursts to say we can do half a day workshop, no problem, but
Yeah.
it will be 3 or 4 sessions that are concise, and each of them has an actual time portion related to, let's get people motivated and connected.
Yeah.
Figuring out, are we solving your problem here, right? If you invite the people, mandatory attention isn't required, right? Just because you're part of the team, you don't have to be there if you can't learn from it or contribute to it.
Yeah.
So really getting people motivated by having a problem that is now solved for them or getting solved for them, or where they can help others to get a problem solved, right? That's what we want. We want the people to be there because they want to be there. And then having short bursts makes it energy management wise so that people stay motivated. But even with the best of methods, it's a totally different beast remote than in person, and you can't get this group feeling of, yeah, we're getting there. It's like that just doesn't happen. Even if everybody's clapping, you just hear this drowned out noise of Zoom clapping. It doesn't work.
No, it's not
So
the same.
yeah, bad drawbacks, but
Yeah, I mean, we keep learning and improving and probably making it
yeah,
better. Hopefully, in the end. What?
yeah, I've seen.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I've seen positive approaches with it, things you couldn't do in the before times, and that is you have 20 people solving a business problem or trying to synchronize a mental model of what are we actually trying to solve here, right? Understanding the problem space first, and then you realize, oh shoot, now that we are getting to this area, we need Tony's information here, right? Or let's call Tanya quickly, and all of a sudden you can send a message and say, hey, do you have time between now and 4 o'clock?
Yeah.
Please join this Zoom link. We have a few questions, and then you put some speech bubbles on the Miro board with questions for Tanya. And then once she joins, you'll just ask like, hey, what's this about? How does this work? What should we do when this fails, right? You're the expert here. So what would you say? And then having an actual conversation, not just some text drop where somebody gives you answers, but going into, okay, why does this matter? What are the alternatives? And a dynamic, quick modeling introduction from someone, and then they can leave again. Those things became possible, and that's immense. That's really great.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, when you're remote, you can quickly say, "Hey, let's copy the whole model." Right? You have a Miro model.
Yeah.
You can select 500 sticky notes, make a duplication, and reshape it, and say, "Wouldn't this look better?" And all of a sudden, it's way easier to work with a malleable model. It's not haptic anymore. You're losing this sense of space, right? It's not that on the left side of the wall, if I go over there, I know we're talking about this part of the model,
Yeah.
but it's all scroll and zoom, but it's easier to change the model again, and that gives, well, it's an unfair advantage, but that gives the technical people more ease of use and more motivation,
Yeah.
which is also the danger, because the people that aren't used to work with computers that much or that don't like Miro that much, those now get a disadvantage, right? Which they wouldn't have in physical space. But
Exactly.
yeah, it's totally different. Totally different problems you have to tackle when you do a remote workshop there.
Yeah, I can imagine so. But I mean, I love those benefits, right? The flexibility of just flying someone in remotely is as simple as just dialing them in and being like, hey, we have these questions. We already wrote them down. So we can give you your
Yeah.
attention basically right now when you join. And we can basically cross off a bunch of questions that we've had. What I'm
Yeah.
missing though, and I don't know if you agree with this, is I think I learn most also when there's kind of a social aspect. I've been listening to this audio book on happiness, and they call it Vitamin S. I
Yeah.
don't know if it's an actual psychologically, or how do you say that? It's studied as much, but those social aspects contribute to personal happiness. And I think if you're happier, you also enjoy those memories more, and maybe even you learn more, or your retention rate is better that way. But it's different when it's remote, right? Because you're very much focused on, okay, we're here with a certain goal. We want to be efficient, and therefore we are effective. But you're missing that
Yeah.
social aspect. You can't just go out of the room and be like, hey guys, 10-minute break, grab a coffee, talk to each other,
Yes.
see how it's going, and then we'll get back to this again.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've tried a few things like breakout rooms for social get-togethers, right? So at the start, if people are introducing themselves, nobody wants to listen to 50 people saying my name is and my role is, right? That's
Yeah.
just boring, especially in Zoom when you can't even look at them really. But so making small breakout groups, having people to connect with just a few people, sharing some fun facts, asking questions like, "Hey, how would you describe your job to your grandparents, right, that are non-nerdy? What do you do every day? Let's
Yeah.
try that." Or that helps a bit, but it's not the same. And especially at the end of the workshop, that's usually when most of the actual truth come out, which I find really interesting. Lots of customers I've had in the past, you do modeling for the whole day, like the business people are there, and then the technical people and some stakeholders, and it feels like, okay, we got there, we really understood everything, and then the workshop ends and you're going to for drinks or dinner with some of the people from the workshop,
Yeah.
and then you hear like, oh yeah, so now I can tell that right now that the boss isn't here anymore. And then you get all
My
the
God.
juicy stories, and that happens so often that you realized, oh yeah, we have been modeling something, everybody was under the impression like this is going really well,
Yeah.
but if psychological safety does not exist, I mean, nowadays I have a feeling for that, right? You get experience with more and more psychological unsafety, and you get it, you feel the tension in the room.
Yeah.
Everybody's very official, and then you know something's up. So, but yeah, it's really hard to break through that when the safety isn't there. As an external facilitator, you can't just say, "Hey, everybody now feels safe and talk to each other. That doesn't work. So
Exactly.
that's something that's cultural change that needs time and deliberate effort from the company. So, but that's what the in-person meetings after the workshop were really good for.
Yeah.
So I've started to bake this into the actual workshop format in virtual and in person. At the end of the workshop, there's always a cool down phase saying, "Hey, we take half an hour, not for feedback, not for reflection, just for let's grab your best pals from the workshop and discuss stuff, right? And if you have anything you'd like to share with me, please do so. Here are some sticky notes. You can also just put a bunch of ideas on there and do whatever you want. Basically, it's just like a cool down time.
Yeah.
Here's well, depends on culture, right? Here's beer or coffee or whatever. And the same thing goes for many remote workshops. When it's not just a 4-hour session, but it's a multi-day session or so, then every time you do a workshop, take 15 to 20 minutes at the end and say, okay, cool down, throw people into breakouts and let them just hang out, chit chat. It's not the same, but it helps a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, what I find is the most important aspect for successful collaborative modeling is psychological safety, right?
Yeah.
That's you feel that when people really don't mind when they say, "Oh yeah, sure, we hang out anyway." That's perfect, and then you know the modeling is going really well. And when
Exactly.
you feel everybody is stiff and they have ranks, and some people have a suit and some don't, and they look at each other different and talk to each other different, then it's like, yeah, you
Something's
can model
off.
as much as you want. Yeah,
Yeah. You're going to get a
uh,
different version of the truth, right? Something that's kind of more superficial, but not the actual
yeah,
truth. So then what you're
yes,
doing isn't really as effective as it can be, which is a shame, right? It's
yeah,
very simple and very nuanced in that way. Yeah.
yeah,
But it's part of getting everyone in the same room. Hierarchy is a part of that. And people always have that in the back of their mind, right? That person is either
absolutely.
my boss or their boss. And if I say something, I might mess up or it's going to come back to
Yeah,
me. And that is very inherent in the culture of a company, which is
absolutely.
very hard to break down and to get everyone to open up to each other.
Yes, and I wouldn't say I would say don't be discouraged by what we just uncovered. Right? It's not that if you don't have the psychological safety that modeling isn't for you.
Yeah.
It's a systemic approach. You can always make things better from wherever you are. You can always use collaboration modeling to get a bit better. And as I said before, right, event storming, for example, has psychological safety improvement built in, not as an idea, but that's what happens when you do it.
Yeah.
Because you see, we're not fighting. I'm not against your idea. I'm taking your idea, putting it on the wall, and then I'm asking critical questions and I show you my idea. And we start standing shoulder to shoulder against the model and just talking about trade offs. And of course, this doesn't go in like one session, everybody loves each other. That doesn't work. But it makes trusting easier because all of a sudden you see, oh yeah, now we uncover some truth that we were maybe afraid or just organizationally impossible to talk about before, and now some things uncover. It's also hard. Sometimes people really don't like seeing the truth and then they fight it, right? But at least you get transparency and you can always make it a bit better than before.
Yeah.
And this is a long game. So changing your company to a psychological safe one. Um, Trust me, I've been 14 years in the same company, and we've managed to get a psychological safe team
Yeah.
and a good connection to other teams. We didn't even manage to get the whole company to psychological safety and enjoying collaboration, and in the end, but still, we made an impact and really made things better over time. So yeah, that's what you can do. Always optimize a bit from where you are to get better, and don't get discouraged by people wanting to work different because they also have needs, right?
Yeah.
They work the way they do because they value hierarchy and the benefits that brings.
Yeah.
It's not all bad to work in a strict role and in a strict hierarchy. It's not what I prefer, but it has benefits. So it's always a trade off, and respecting everyone's cultural decisions and then making things transparent to come to a common goal. I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely agree with that. It's going to take a few years because this change is, it's not going to
Yeah.
happen overnight, right? It's a change that is on a multitude of levels within an organization and that affects lots of people. And if those people don't agree, either they move with the flow or they move against the flow. And usually moving against it means they have to leave at some
Yeah.
point, which means you're looking at a multitude of years before an organization can make a cultural shift like that. But
Yeah.
if we step back and ask the question, why are we modeling in the first place? Because modeling is more of a what, right? It's a method to solve certain problems. I think it's because we kind of lack the understanding, or there's a mismatch in understanding how either an organization works or the chain of event works or what each other is actually doing or helping to speak the same language? Why do we model in the first place?
Well, that's a very philosophical question. So bear with me. I'm going to take you to through your childhood now.
Yeah.
Um, there's the official modeling that we do nowadays in software development, right? And the official ideas or the main ideas are you model to synchronize understanding.
Mm.
So you have an idea in your head, I have an idea in my head, and we can't share ideas. I cannot give you my brain content.
Yeah.
I can only use words to describe things, and you might misunderstand those words. You most likely not, you will guaranteed misunderstand in some sense, because a perfect transference of internal words doesn't happen. So we use a lot of symbols like words, gestures, drawings, sticky notes, any method we can find to synchronize, and through active feedback. I'm doing something, you're showing me what you understand, I show you what I think that you understand, so on, right? We do that for a while until we realize, yep, we now talk about enough of the same thing that we can productively move on from here. And well, reason number one is to synchronize understanding, like, do we share the same problem? And the other is to come up with solutions. Say, hey, we could do this, right? And you say, that's a good idea. We could also do that. What are the trade offs? Is there a polarity here? What are we optimizing for? What are we optimizing against with this solution?
Yeah.
And is there some hybrid middle ground, right? So, problem space understanding and solution space discovery and design. Those are the main reasons from a architect, modeler, DDD point of view. But I think it goes way, way, way beyond that, because I think modeling is inherent in human nature since the moment you're born.
Mm.
That's what your brain is doing all the time. It's modeling. And this is where it gets philosophical a bit. So I'm trying to keep this short,
Yeah.
but you you don't see reality. That's one of the facts of life. You don't see the real world.
Okay.
What you see, real seeing, is a model your brain builds in your head. It's a virtual world where your brain renders a 3D image from photons hitting your eyeballs. So it's interpretation of light waves of the electromagnetic spectrum and generating a 3D world, which is an image of reality, but it's not reality in your head, right? So
Yeah.
and what you do as a child, your brain basically just fires and your arms wiggle and your eyes just see something and it makes no sense to you. And then over time, these feedback loops generate patterns and you realize, oh, this is my arm, right? I mean, not in that word sense, but the awareness of what shapes respond to which images, to which touch, and all of that is modeling. And then you keep on modeling. You make sense of reality
Mm.
by having an idea of, hey, what if we play father, mother, child, right? You model reality
Yeah.
by what you observe, you transfer it into a game, and then you play situations, and that gives you feedback again for the real world. And it sounds like an official thing that children learn to do, but of course, you don't have to learn that.
Yeah.
It's just what your brain does. You have ideas, hypotheses. It's basically the small scientist in your brain. You have hypotheses about reality. You do things with it in experimental ways, in modeling, in prototyping, and then it pushes back to reality. And right, everybody had tried to move a coin with their mind or to fly and didn't work.
Yeah.
And it sounds stupid, like, because why are children doing that and we don't do that as grown-ups? But we do. We don't do it with coins and telekinesis because we learned that doesn't work. That was one experiment, right? We do it with other things, with things that are way more complex, because you grow and grow over time in more complexity.
Yeah.
And everything that you've learned becomes reality for you, and a truth that is harder to change. But that's what your brain does. It's only modeling the whole time. And when you want to build a soft piece of software, or when you solve a business problem, you keep on doing the same thing, right? We are modeling anyway, even if we don't do collaborative modeling exercises.
Yeah.
And that's the hard pill to swallow for many people. Like, you have been modeling because somebody gave you a document, right? They were modeling by writing down what they think you need to hear to solve their problem.
Yeah.
And now you take this piece of paper, you read it, and you build software because you take this model from paper into code through your head. But we realized that non-collaborative modeling has really, really slow feedback loops.
Mm.
So if you give me 200-page documentation and I write code and then you test it, which is already something not every company does, right? But then you
Yeah.
test it and then we feedback. This is a week-long feedback loop if it's fast, right? So it would be better to be within days or maybe hours, and the best feedback loop would be zero, standing in front of each other, talking together about the model,
Yeah.
and having the fastest feedback loop possible until we both agree, like, yep, this is what we want. Great.
Exactly.
And
Interesting, because you started off with kind of the language, right? I have a certain idea and I'm trying to convey that to you. But our
yeah,
brains work differently. Also, how we've modeled the work or how we understand the problem is completely different. So there's an inherent miscommunication in how we communicate, right? Whether
yes,
it's linguistics, whether it's I'm typing a piece of software and you're interpreting it, whether I write a certain document, right? I get people sending emails and people reading it and be like, man, they're mad at me. And I'm like, well, how'd you get that? Like, I don't understand it. But there's people interpreting things based on how they grew up, how they see the world, or how either they were raised or it's inherently in there. I don't know exactly what it is, but there is always
yeah,
inherent miscommunication then. So then
yeah.
the collaborative modeling, hopefully, allows you to focus on that miscommunication and make it more or absolve it more.
Yeah, and that's the part where the different methods become valuable, right?
Mm.
Um, I mean, collaborative modeling is the easiest thing in the world. It basically means you put people together and then they talk.
Exactly.
But then come all the hardships, right? Some people, as you say, misunderstand each other,
Yeah.
and you misunderstand many things. It starts with the pure language, right? I'm saying words, and you have a different meaning for those words in your head. If I say shipment, you say crate. We might mean the same thing,
Yeah.
but because we work in different areas, right? We now have different words for it. So there's two ways of misunderstanding: using different words for the same concept, or having the same word for different concepts, slightly or fully. So that's the linguistic part, which is tackled by domain-driven design and the ubiquitous language. And having a collaborative modeling method that uses visualization to show, oh, this is a context here. Let's draw a boundary. Let's draw a bubble around it and show in this area, this word means this specific thing. When we go over the boundary into this area, this is where the language changes. It seems so trivial to make that visually distinct, but the moment you do it, oftentimes you see so many people's eyes light up like, oh, wow. And then they realize why they were misunderstanding each other so much. But it doesn't stop there, right? It's also the things you don't say. I don't say a lot of things because they are implicit and they are super obvious to anyone
Yeah.
working in my field. But you have no clue this topic even exists, and you can't because we never talk about it. Um, and that's all official communication about a topic. And then you have emotional communication, right? The way you say things to people, para and nonverbal communication, that gets strongly misunderstood.
Yeah.
One of my favorite examples, like I was at my own conference in Berlin, the Kandinsky, and there was a person, I think, from Indian origin, and I was talking about aggregates, and he was like shaking his head the whole time. I was like, yes, and I kept on arguing more and more, and at some point somebody stopped me and said, hey, that's just acknowledgement. I'm like, oh wow, okay, cultural sensitivity, right?
Yeah.
So all of a sudden you realize even the things you thought were universal aren't universal, and those surprises can come in any company. So you don't know how people mean things that you misunderstand. So the emotional part is like, that's a minefield in companies that don't have psychological safety already baked in fully. So, and even then, it's hard work, right? You
Yeah.
always need to keep psychological safety up. It's work to keep it going, because you need to work on the trust that you have with the people around you.
Yeah.
Um,
It sounds like
yeah,
such a fluid thing because, I mean, people are
yeah,
different, right? Cultures are different, organizations are different. So there's no kind of cookie cutter mold that you can apply, right? We have these methods and we have these tools, and they're
yeah,
applicable in some situations, or
yeah,
we've grouped them. Therefore, we think these are applicable in a lot of situations because we have the history to back that up, right? But that's no
yeah,
guarantee for the future. So if a company gets you in and they're like, okay, we have these kinds of problems, we think these are the best tools, they might be completely misunderstanding either the tools or the problems, or there's a lot of things that can go wrong within that. How do you,
yeah.
when you come in, first of all, figure out what they actually need, um, and then actually help them attain that?
Yeah. So the thing is, I don't know if I ever really understand what companies really need.
Yeah,
Even
that's
if you
then
think,
still your interpretation.
right. So
Yeah,
that's like, there's a philosophical gap that I can never break. Right.
yeah,
I can't ever have the guarantee, but I mean, that's not the point of the question. It's just philosophy again. But the thing is, heuristics is what we do. Using heuristical approaches, not metrics, and not default method that you always use, right? I don't go to a company and say, let's do event storming just because I know how to do it. And then we'll get this kind of result. And then we'll take it and do a context mapping and whatnot. It's like, first you talk to them and figure out what are your pain points, right? There's a scoping call usually. People explain what they want. And I always try to listen into the emotional side of things, see where people get excited or get angry. When they describe a problem, large parts of the problem are just like, and this is it, and that is it, and this is it. It sounds very boring, but they describe stuff. And then you see them getting emotional at some topics, like, okay, let's dive deeper into those.
Yeah.
Right. So going with emotional cues to get some hold. And then usually even the easiest scoping call is already a modeling session, a secret one, right? We're not calling it that, but writing stuff down, asking critical questions, doing all the heuristics we know from modeling to figure out the real intent behind that request. But again, it's just an inkling you get. You get an idea of what they want, and you get a mandate for what they want you to do for them.
Yeah.
And very often it's like people want you to teach them test-driven development so the developers produce better quality. If you understand the why, right? This is Simon Sinek, the idea going with that, always start with understanding the why. If you understand why they get you, why they want this thing to be taught, then you can modify during the workshop to approach that goal better.
Exactly.
Sometimes they don't need test-driven development. You realize, well, the quality is good. People think TDD makes you better in quality, but your quality is okay. What's not okay is that you're not building what the customer needs. So there's a conversation missing.
Yeah.
Sometimes a conversation is happening, but the quality is crappy because of the legacy, and the old system is not really maintainable, but it has to be maintained due to cost. So let's figure out a strategy to get out of the legacy rut, right? Let's build smaller anti-corruption layers and extract new parts of the domain to be able to move fast again. So that was a long-winded political answer. The short answer is heuristics instead of default methods is the goal. So
What do
I
you
have a
mean when you
bunch of
say
heuristics.
heuristics?
Yeah, defining heuristics is a hard thing. A heuristic is a rule of thumb that you can use to get answers fast. So a heuristic is not a scientific method to say, hey, this is an approach that is proven to work, right? A heuristic is any kind of rule that you can put for any kind of situation that helps you to get fast answers due to a certain behavior. Let me try with an example. When I feel that people are talking to each other and they both nod, but I feel that they don't understand, then I visualize, right? That's my heuristic, the visualization heuristic. I say, when I have a feeling you misunderstand each other, let's draw what we mean on sticky notes and put it into a timeline. And now we really see, are we talking about the same thing? That doesn't mean I'm always getting the right answer. Sometimes the message is just a waste of time, but it's a heuristic that more often than not gives me a good answer.
Yeah.
Technical heuristics, if you have something like you have multiple services or bounded contexts that are talking to each other, you can of course query the data, you can go with an API and doing this or that, or you can publish an event that is semantic, right? So doing that gives you better understanding, more decoupled systems. So that's a heuristical approach to say, if your system feels too tight and coupled, going for events, semantical events, is a good heuristic to get you out of that rut. It's not the only way, it's not the best way or anything. It's a heuristic that you can use. And it always comes, that's another heuristic, right? It always comes with the idea of small controlled experiments, which is a heuristic in of itself. So whenever I do a heuristic, I'm not just applying it and then run away and hope it worked. It's you do something, you figure out what's the impact, what are the pros and cons, what do we see here. And Matthias Varese brought a nice heuristic once. It was the anti-heuristic or something, or the counter-heuristic.
Okay.
It's like for every heuristic you apply, figure out the counter-heuristic that would do the opposite. That is also helpful, right? And try that, figure out if that gives you different results. So thinking about the opposites is something that I really do a lot when I try to help something or someone. The moment I apply a heuristic, I know I'm guessing, right? It's a gambling game.
Yeah.
And you're not it's a gambling that makes you learn in the long run, but in a short term it might be a cost that is high, right? So you have to do a modeling, invite 20 people. That's a heuristical approach. I think that would help. What if it doesn't? Well, before you do it, you can think about the counter heuristic, like what would happen if we do it the other way, another way that is opposite to that. And then you have a trade-off that you can really think about and figure out. And it doesn't have to be you alone, right? You can make this a collaborative decision.
Yeah.
How shall we approach this? I think this is the best approach, so let's go with that. Or these are the trade-offs. Let's make a decision here. So that's what heuristics are. And there's a nice website by Kenny Bass and myself and a few others, the dddheuristics.com,
Yeah.
where we gather all the heuristics from domain-driven design, modeling, collaboration, um, and it's an open invitation to anyone to put more heuristics in there. Right? It's a starting point to say, if you've never worked with heuristics, um, don't wait for the next method to solve all your problems. Right?
Yeah.
Test-driven development didn't solve all our problems. Functional programming or object-oriented programming didn't solve all our problems, and Agile didn't. So it's not the method that solves your problems. It's heuristical approaches in a certain mindset that solves your problems. That has the highest chance to do that. So gather your own heuristics to really build up a tool set, your own tool belt that you can pick from.
Yeah.
Um, and that's the important part, right? All these things we can give from external are good impulses, good starting points. And due to a lot of experience, I mean, I've modeled over 100 different domains.
Yeah.
I can see some meta patterns other people don't see that stick in one company for years. But those people have an insight into their own business that I can never have, right? So they have a different world. They need their own heuristics. If you build your own tool set from that, figure out what works in your context, what doesn't, that's your best chance of really improving over time and getting your company's problems solved.
Interesting. I think everyone has their own heuristics, right? It's maybe even a gut feeling, or but you're really externalizing. If this happens, then I usually do this, or I think this is then the best option. But we also have these options, or we have these counter options, and we can weigh
Yeah.
them out. And it's for decision making, I guess.
Yeah.
Do you
So,
like most of the heuristics you use? Did you come up with them on your own, or did you take them from
oh
other
no, oh God,
people?
no. No.
Yeah,
This is the most collaborative effort I've ever been part of.
that's really
Um,
cool. Yeah,
That is, yeah, absolutely. So, without the community of domain driven design practitioners and software professionals, and now even psychologists and other fields, this wouldn't have been possible. I mean, it's like, I don't know if I have any heuristic that was completely my own. I
mm,
have my own local heuristics, right, for my companies or my teams. I'm experimenting. And that's kind of like the gist that I'm going with the whole time. I try to adapt methods, and then I try to adapt them for the problem that I see at hand.
yeah,
So event storming is great, context mapping is great, other methods, Wardley mapping for situational awareness, right? Those are all tools for a specific purpose. But then you approach an actual company problem and you're like, okay, let's just mix and match, right? It's not about doing the tool right.
yeah,
It's about figuring out what do you need right now. And from all the tools I know, let's just Frankenstein together some new method that helps you right now. And sometimes people need to hear the name. They want to have an event storming. Cool, I call it that. But if I know that a context boundary would help now, then I draw one and just still call it event storming because management pays for that. That's fine.
yeah.
But that's my Frankenstein heuristic. Basically, I'm always putting together a method from all the rest. Um, but I'm not the only one in the world who ever did that. But the whole point is the DDD community is meeting multiple times a year at various conferences,
Yeah.
and there's open spaces and user groups in every bigger city, and this continuous learning loop that has been going on for years now, culminating in the virtual DDD community, right, at virtualddd.com, where we have like interview sessions and modeling sessions and participation sessions of the whole community every few weeks. This learning effort made all these things transparent, and there's like, to drop a few names there, right? A big thank you goes out to Nick Tune, who is building, together with some other practitioners, building a repository called DDD Crew on GitHub.
Mm.
So it's github.com/DDD Crew, where you find a lot of very concise and very clear written explanations of, hey, this is how you can approach context mapping, a bounded context canvas, an aggregate design. So all these things that are hard to do when you start, that's all written out. Virtual DDD has all these interview sessions and a learning journey for beginners, and so on and so on. Like, it's a big community effort. So no one should come up with their own heuristics on their own and keep them for themselves. Like, this only works as a community.
Yeah.
And what I feel very strongly is we don't compete in methods of modeling. We don't compete in being good modelers. We compete in shift planning. We compete in car automation, in whatever your domain is that you work in, right?
Yeah.
That's where people compete. But the craftsmanship of building good software, or the craftspersonship of building good software, um, and for that matter, building good systems, because it's not software, it's humans, automated pieces, right? Manual pieces, whatever you design to solve problems, how to solve problems is something we don't compete in. That's something we need to collaborate in as not only as a company or as a community, but as a whole planet. Because, I mean, people might have noticed, but the world is kind of screwed a little bit in multiple areas, and we're not going to solve it by keeping our trade secrets and trying to become more rich as an individual. We're solving them by collaborating and sharing methods of how to solve problems better. So
Yeah.
there's your little your little moral compass on top. So
I mean,
software modeling.
I completely agree with you on that, right? That's why I love being part of this community. And I think it's also very unique within this community. There's so many
Yeah.
ways of conveying and sharing knowledge, right? We have blog posts, podcasts, videos on YouTube, just plain text, or even conferences, getting together as a meetup, stuff like that. It's all with the main goal of knowledge sharing, right? How do
Yeah.
you solve this? How have you solved this? What can we learn from that? Should we also try that? What are the edge cases? What are the trade-offs, right? Sharing whatever you've done, so someone else either is going to learn from that, is going to make the same
Yeah.
mistakes, realizing they can, or they're going to avoid that and choose other options, right? To do what we do and be better because of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would even go one step further. I mean, totally agree with you there. But I would even extend the sharing into collaboration on that. So sharing ideas is great, and that is what conferences have been for many years, right?
Yeah.
But we realized in the last few years that at Kandinsky, our conference in Berlin, it's a conference about domain-driven design centric and everything that makes business software better. At some point, we realized the talks aren't what people really come for. I mean, it's interesting to get an inspiration, right? But you can't really teach someone a topic in an hour of a talk.
Yeah.
But collaborating on things, really doing a hands-on 2, 3, 4 hours of getting into a topic with the experts and the experimenters, and ideally even with contradicting opinions, having two experts that solve it differently. Let's have a hands-on session and really share stuff and work on this, not just by transferring knowledge, but by engaging into each other's ideas and getting better at practicing. So that's what I think is really important, to build a community of shared practitioners that work together and improve together, and not just share ideas, which is already a good start, but that's just the starting point of getting a real traction on the road.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you see that more and more in software development as well, right? Co-creating, collaborating, doing things
Yeah.
together, sharing each other's mental model or externalizing it or doing it together. I think it's more fun for me personally, and I think it's more effective down the road as well, which is great. If I move back to the heuristics, have you ever read something that you're like, that's never going to work, then applied it and it actually did work? Or have you applied things and then it just failed horribly?
I have to think about. I've done it the other way around. I've thought, hey, this is definitely going to work, and then it didn't.
Yeah.
That was Scrum for us. We thought that we would solve our problems by doing, hey, we're not communicating properly. Let's put this framework into place, and then with an agile mindset, we're going to go to the future.
Yeah.
And then it was a long struggle. It always felt like, oh, we're getting there, we're getting better, we're getting measurable results, right? The pace is going up and whatnot, velocity is improving, cool. But after a year or two, realizing we didn't really move anywhere from here because company culture is still broken. That's the thing not working. That's where modeling at some point came in. But I don't think that I ever read something where I was like, oh, this is never going to work. No, I've never had that, because I never think things never going to work. I always try to figure out in which context is this helpful. So that's the different mindset, right? So
Yeah.
I was just wondering why I never thought that anything wouldn't work. I often think things don't work in this context. But I'm open to experimentation. So
Yeah.
what I try to do is, this is the whole opposite heuristic approach again. A few years back, this was an idea by Greg Young, which I really liked. He said, like, okay, do something, and if you do something and it works in a certain way, and now I lost my train of thought. Sorry. Forget about it. So what I do is I experiment with things, even with the when I think this cannot work, right? Try something and figure out what it gives you and what it doesn't give you before
Yeah.
you shun the idea off. So that at the basic mindset makes that I never take an idea as like, hey, this can never work.
I really like that approach, and I agree with that mindset as well, right? Sometimes I hear people say, oh, this sucks, or I have bad experiences within this. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It just wasn't the right time, right place, right context even, because it was right for a certain context, a certain domain, or a certain situation. So having that kind of open mindset and being like, oh, I mean, you can have right or wrong. It's not that black and white, which is also why it's getting, or why it is interesting, right? It's not easy. If it was black and white, we would have solved all our issues, but it isn't,
Yeah,
which means there's always going to be trade-offs and situations.
absolutely. So I think the hard part is we're solving complex problems, right? That's
Yeah,
where what this whole discussion is about. Of course, there are bad solutions and things that don't work, and you know they don't work in simple problems. That's an important distinction to make. If somebody says, "Hey, I want to clean up the wall and I'm going to do it with mud," yeah, that doesn't work. I know that for a fact because I modeled this, I've seen it, I know how physics work. This is definitely not true. This is not going to work. But we're not solving those problems anymore, right? In software, we're not solving like, hey, I want to store a file on a hard drive. How to do that? That problem is solved. You can read up and you can solve it. We're solving complex systemic problems where things are interacting and you don't know what happens if you do this. You don't know how the market changes, the future changes. You might not even know all the trade-offs of the underlying ecosystem and infrastructure and so on. So in this ever-shifting area of technology, people, ideas, and needs, you're trying to build something that is stable enough to generate value and not only financial, but actual provide a betterment of your company or humanity or whatever your goal is.
yeah,
And that needs constant attendance and attention and shifting of the solution itself, right? So in that area there are no simple truth, there is no right or wrong. It's always a complex situation that you need to model and understand trade-offs. um, this is why there are no bad solutions. If somebody says let's do this, it's like, if you feel that's really important, let's figure out why, right? What's your need? And then map that.
yeah,
Why do we want the other thing? Like, why do five people say no, the opposite, but you say very strongly this direction? And can we experiment? Can we do something to actually learn? That would be wise and great to do. That's not always possible. So sometimes we shun off an idea, even though it would be great to learn from it, because, well, if you have a time constraint, right? Next Wednesday needs to be delivered. We can't do much experimentation on two opposite solutions. So let's go with, I don't know, majority or risk avoidance or whatever you are optimizing for. But that's again is a heuristic, and it doesn't mean that the other solution was bad, just that you had to optimize against it for reasons.
yeah. I think, I mean, that's what gives me energy, right? It's some rules that are laid out. Sometimes you can challenge those rules, but that's kind of the context you work within,
Yeah.
and making it happen, being effective within that, and making stuff happen together with other people. If it was just me by myself doing some things, I wouldn't get as excited because we're
Yeah.
always dealing with people in this aspect, and doing things together, getting that result together makes it just a great journey along the way as well.
And that is precisely where I think the effort of collaborative modeling comes into play, because in the beginning you have these constraints, right? Somebody's setting constraints, whoever that is. In a startup it's the market or so, and in a strong company it's a hierarchy. You have rules that can't be bent or that are not meant to be bent right now,
Yeah,
and those are enabling constraints first, right? This is like, hey, this is your framework. Within this you can work creatively, do your best, right? And if you're very young, or let's not age, but if you are unexperienced in your field, having strong constraints helps you to get a clear focus and to practice and to get your hands on stuff. But then you realize, oh, there's a trade-offs and you can make decisions, so you need relaxed constraints. So enabling constraints at any level of maturity become constraining constraints at some point. So it become just fixating you on the wrong path.
yeah,
And that is where, well, in many companies, people just leave the company, go other places, or they try to go to a different department, right? Try to avoid the problem by leaving. Um, or that it's this very long and painful process of making things aware, and then higher ups are feeling challenged, but that's not the point, and so on and so forth. So this is where collaborative modeling methods, for me, were a really helpful tool as a guerrilla tactic,
mm,
saying, I see the constraints given to me. I work within those until I reach a limit where I say, systemically, my work here is not the best help I can do for the company. I see we have a problem that goes beyond my ability to code faster or produce higher, less bug rates. I mean, but fewer bugs, right? This is more about, can we solve the right problem? Do we have the right feedback loops and so on? So
yeah,
let's work on that. And if you feel nobody empowers you to do that, you can always empower yourself by just making things transparent, right? Take a few sticky notes, go out into the hallway where the business people see you, and start modeling. Someone will ask you what you're doing, right? That's I mean, this is a heuristic with a lot of drawbacks and risks, and not for every company, but as an idea. using different collaboration methods, guerrilla style, just involving one person that is kind of benevolent towards you and asking them for help and get them excited about what you're doing because you're trying to solve their problem, not trying to get them to help you solve yours.
Exactly.
And using this step by step helps you soften the walls, right? The constraints go away after a while, and then you can start to build your own constraints, figure out what do we need to do? How do we need to frame ourselves and help others that are learning now to be able to do their best work? So,
Yeah. It's those
constraints are a helpful tool. Yeah.
it's those kind of small ripples that eventually will turn into waves, but you just need to make sure you ripple here and there with the right people and the right time and places, or even a wrong ripple here and there, because you're going to learn from those. But eventually you will create those big waves that will create the change you intended. One of the final questions I had was, I saw on Twitter or LinkedIn, I don't know exactly where, but it said, Marco Heimeshoff, king of stickies or master of stickies, some kind of sticky master kind of thing. And also when I jumped in the call, I mean, I see the stickies behind you. What's up with the master of stickies thing?
Yeah, so that is that's the same thing that Elon Musk is doing when he calls himself king of technology or something, right? It's just, I despise titles. I don't like that people call you like, never mind, right? Any kind of title that gives you a hierarchical power, which is symbolic violence in that sense. Like this is the chief consultancy, whatever, or CTO, or those titles have meaning in some companies and they are important to clarify roles. But I feel so strongly about collaborative modeling, and roles, specifically organizational hierarchical roles, don't really matter in that sense. When you come together to solve a problem, you want to bring the people that have questions about the model or that can give answers about the model. You want to have the people that are affected by the outcome of the model. Whoever that is doesn't really matter, right? Those people should be there. So, in my last company, people tried to give me titles and said, you're the team lead now. I'm like, great. Now I'm like, this is my role. Now I get a different one. I never changed what I did because of a title. It was the other way around, but I always tried to help systemically figuring out what's our bottleneck. Is it learning? Is it process? Is it coding ability? What's our bottleneck? Let's solve that bottleneck first and then move on to the next one. Always increasing situational awareness together. And at some point people slap titles on you. And once I became fully self-employed as a consultant, I'm like, I'm the chief of sticky notes. I'm the master of storytelling, like whatever. Like I just put stuff in there that eases people to see, hey, take it with a little smile and a grain of salt, right? We can solve all the problems you want. But if you're looking for someone whose title enables him to help you, I'm the wrong person for your company because I don't like that culture. I don't want to be called in because I am Mr. XY, that, the DDD expert or whatever. You need help. I'm able to help. Let's have a call, and then we can actually move mountains. If you get me in to teach your programmers to be better programmers, but you don't want to do the work to model with them, then please don't call me. That's not what I do.
Exactly.
That's why chief of sticky notes. And well, these sticky notes here is basically my cash that I need for when I go event storming. Just grab a bag of those and
makes total sense. I love it, man. Let's round it off there. Is there anything you still wanna share?
I would like to invite everybody to come to Berlin in October to the Kandinsky conference. That's under www.kandinsky.com with 3D. And it's a conference about the art of business software and collaborative modeling, domain-driven design and coding with lots of hands-on experience and practice. So I would love to see you there or at the virtual DDD community. And I'm super happy to engage with anyone on Twitter. So hit me up at Heimeshoff. If you want to engage in a discussion, I'm always open to talk to anyone about anything.
Awesome.
Thank you very much for having me.
I'll put the links to his socials on the description below. Marco Heimeshoff is probably everywhere, right? LinkedIn, Twitter, all that jazz.
Everywhere, yes.
But you'll see it there. And that's it. Thanks for joining us. Let us know in the comments what you thought about this episode, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks for listening, everyone. If you like the episode and want to support the show, don't forget to leave a rating. Better yet, share the episode with a friend. Let us know in the comment section below what you want to hear, and we'll make it happen. Cheers.